really excited to be in India. This is my first time here, and granted, all I know is this hall and the hotel over there because I've been here for a day, but I'm keen to explore more. So yeah, up there, there's a title, Art Isn't an Island, Lessons from the Gardens Between. And it's really going to be a bunch of lessons and notes from the time I spent as animation lead on the Gardens Between. So just bear with me if a bit of this is a bit meandering, a bit dense, or if it drags a little. We're just going to have fun and yeah, let's go. So first things first, I'm Josh. Josh Alan Bradbury, Josh Allen at Josh Allen B on Twitter or Instagram if you want to reach out or tweet about any of the stuff in the talk, send me a message. That's fine with me. I love to talk. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm from Melbourne, Australia, which is also an island. That's the title of the, yeah. So I've been working in video games pretty much only in Melbourne for over 7 years now on multiple award-winning Australian indie game titles such as Framed 1 and 2, Mellow, and The Gardens Between. And what I'm doing with myself right now, I'm currently working as a technical artist with another local Melbourne developer, Mountains. Mountains is a craft games studio and the developers of the multi-award-winning iOS title, Florence. We're actually got 2 projects in the works at the moment. They're quite exciting, but it might be a while until you get to see what we're doing, but I can't wait to show you. All right, so I tried to simplify my job into a single screen and it didn't really work. So I just put GIFs up. So essentially, what I do is I try everything within my power to turn concept art or a simple visual into moving, reactive versions of itself through a very simple process. Getting the concept art, freaking out, then Googling and planning, and then just putting some great music on and getting to work on playing with all the pixels that will end up on the screen. Until boom, simple, easy, game done, right? No. But what do I actually do? What do I do? So my artistic skills include, but aren't limited to, animation and 3D art, shaders, and VFX. I started my career as a freelance 3D animator, and that's the skill that I most often rely on if I'm making something for myself, like that moving blob thing up there. That's just a quick example of things I like to do in my spare time. It's a character that I created for some VFX practice, and also to see if I could make a character out of my initials, JAB. That's not all I do. I have to also have very technical aspects of my job on the computer. And so I do a lot of rigging. I do code and art implementation, as well as pipeline management. So trying to make sure all the art comes in and looks the best that it can be. These specific technical skills are ones I developed mostly through working on The Gardens Between. And I developed them through wanting to find any way to make my art really shine in-game. And that was a really important aspect of it for me. So I built those skills. And one of my favorite skills is sleep. No, I really love sleep. Did anybody else get a good sleep last night? No, me neither. I was too busy stressed about this talk. All right, so let's get started. Art isn't an island. This is a talk about art, but it's not a talk about literally making art. I'm sure you're all great at that already, really. This talk is about everything else that surrounds being an artist in game development, particularly in a small team. So let's hurry up and get started. No, one more thing. So everything in this talk is coming from my own personal experience in small and creative focused teams between 3 to 9 people around about. I actually don't have any projects that are much larger than that I've worked on in my whole career. Don't worry if everything that in this talk doesn't apply directly to you and your situation. I'm sure some of these concepts will be relevant to you at some point in your career. All right, so this talk is also about The Gardens Between. It's a really unique game, and it went through a really rocky and tough development, but we got it out, and it was a labor of love for everyone in the studio. It was developed by the Voxel Agents, another Melbourne studio, best known for their arcade-style mobile games like the Train Conductor series and Puzzle Retreat on mobile phones. I'm really proud of what we made together. We got a bunch of awards, and it's kind of a bit hard to explain without really just showing it in motion. So I'm just going to see if I can play the trailer here. Hopefully there's sound too. Let's see. No sound. Damn. Ta-da. Oh, it's so magical. Fall into a surreal world. So, yeah, we got a bunch of really, really good feedback from when we released this. It's a really unique game. Essentially, it's about time manipulation. So you can move time forwards and backwards to explore these strange islands that these two best friends get lost in. And there's a overarching story that you kind of uncover as you continue forward. And they're all very like visual focused puzzles. You have to change the state of each island to kind of help the characters move forward on their journey. It's a really good trailer with the music. Cool. That's it. So that's the game. It's out. So yeah, we made that. It's still very surreal for me that we finished it. It's been out for about a year now, and yeah, I'll just do the general spiel to kind of try and explain what you saw as well. I did a little bit during the trailer, but so The Gardens Between is a surreal puzzle adventure game that follows two best friends, Arena and Frent, as they fall into a mysterious world of beautiful garden islands. You can manipulate time to solve puzzles and discover the secrets of each island. The story is told without text or dialogue, and each island they visit represents an important moment they have spent together over the course of their childhood friendship. Yeah, it's out now on like every platform except Android. You can get it on your iPhones, but I don't know, Android's pretty tough, so we skipped that one. So yeah, throughout development, it was created by a team of 4 to 9 people over the course of 3.5 years. We could stretch that to 4.5, 5. It's kind of hard to work out when it actually started. It went through a lot of iterations. It was self-published by the Voxel Agents themselves. The way we were able to do that, we were mostly running off our own Steam, previous game revenue from our mobile games, and local media grants. Our state in Australia has a quite robust grant program to allow for games be developed there. The game came out to amazing critical reception, including picking up an Apple Developer Award for our iOS port. And we all really, really burned out. Yeah. So these are the lessons that that I've kind of distilled down for you throughout the development of this very unique game. As I said before, I was the lead animator on this project, but due to the nature of small teams, my role within the game constantly evolved during development. I was making VFX to creating game design, code. Things were always interesting in the development. And so the three main lessons that I've kind of distilled it down to in order to be able to present it here are these ones: getting off the island, aligned communication, and expanding your art. Let's get started. So the beginning. I joined the team, the Voxel Agents, on the Gardens Between at a point where the game was just a prototype. It was called something like the Blue Mountain or something like that. And I joined about 2.5 years before release. And I was hired just to come on board as a contract 3D animator to help essentially polish up the current prototype and just improve the animation, but not much else. The two main problems I remember them asking me to solve were: how can we make our characters feel alive? And how can we scale our animation approach between two hard-coded prototype levels? I'd love to go into those questions, but there was way more to come. So I set to work. It was exciting. It made sense at the time, but I was naive. I was hired to be a little contractor on the side, and that's not what the game needed. And it became quite obvious quite quickly. That's me with shorter hair when I was working on the game. So this is the state of the game when I joined. This is the Blue Mountain prototype. And the game was always very art focused and quite cool in like how you could control time to move backwards and forwards. But those were the only two real things that it had going for it. It was a really tough project to wrangle. And the problems that I came in were just to make the characters walk a bit better and not slide their feet on the ground. And that didn't feel quite right. The sort of questions that came up early on, after a couple of months of me just animating on the game, were something like this: how do we even make a full experience out of this? What are our puzzles? That's kind of important. Do we even have game rules, or should we change all of our rules per level? Can we actually make time control feel cool? Does the boy have a robot hand? Why does he have a robot hand? He doesn't have a robot hand anymore. But we did have him with a robot hand for a while. Isn't this game just a glorified video player that you can move backwards and forwards? That was a big one. Like, we had to try and like avoid that for a while. Do the characters know about the time manipulation? What kind of story are we telling? How do we even tell a story with so many self-imposed limitations of no text or dialogue, and the kind of, we have put a lot of self-imposed limitations on this game. Have we missed the moment when these games were popular? I think that's always a big question in game development. And if we were telling a story, we probably need cutscenes or something, right? And oh gosh, what have we got ourselves in for? Yeah, it was pretty daunting, but there was hope. Something had to change, and I'm going to talk about how I was able to change my own role within the company to help the game move forward. Getting myself off the island of just animating, or maybe getting everyone on the same shared island within the team. So on top of all those really scary problems that I described, at this time we were also having a lot of problems in simply communicating within our tiny team of 4 to 5 at that point. So, our designer had a lofty vision. He wanted to make something timeless and impactful. Art wanted something incredibly cool and wouldn't sacrifice on quality regardless. And our programmers were stretched and fighting to create systems that the rest of the team wasn't even sure were the right things or even a final design. But at least they were working on something. We actually went through a lot of programmers because of this. That was a really bad process. Everything and everyone relied on each other because it was such a small team. And yet no one had any clear answers or a clear way of communicating their goals. Producers are not optional. We thought they were. We had a team of 4 to 5. We were all creators, and nobody wanted to stick their hand up and produce the game, like make sure it was on track. We all just wanted to make the game. I feel like that lost us a year of development. So yes, make sure you have a dedicated producer. I just really wanted to put that in there. It was a big thing for us. We got one in the end and things started coming together, but shout out to producers. You're amazing. So at this point in development, everyone had a different idea of what the game was, because so many of those questions, like core questions, weren't clearly answered. We had a prototype, yeah, it was kind of cool. But the final game seemed to be quite different in each person's head. Like, what would it actually be when it wasn't just 2 levels? We were unaligned. Nobody really knew what this game was going to turn out like. Have you ever been in a meeting and it seems like everyone is talking about the same idea or concept, but disagreeing at the same time, right? It's like, no, but that's what you said, but no. Yeah, that was us all the time. For a weird metaphor, we were like a bunch of people all circling a single island and approaching it from completely different directions. For example, from the sky or under the ground or swimming, I guess. My point is that each of us were too focused on our approach to the island, our individual ideas, and the way that we were getting to that goal, rather than the fact that we were all going to the same place. And it was really important to understand that. While sitting in these meetings, I found myself in a unique position. As the newest hire, and at that point, I had a fresh outside perspective. And as we talked about every aspect of the game, it really seemed like animation was a core concept that imbued and strung together all of our game goals, particularly the fact that it was a narrative puzzle game with no text or speech. So everything had to be communicated through the environment and the animations, apart from menus. Yeah, we got to that later. So I took a chance and I stepped off my island that I was hired to do and into a bigger role than I would have imagined. I somehow began to directly influence the game design through these discussions and change the direction of the game through expressing things that I had learned previously in making my own small games on my own, and also tried to do my best to help align the team towards the central goals of the game. So how can you try to help your own team if you find yourself in a similar situation? Here's some things I discovered as I went. So repeating people's statements back to them. So this is a really good way of trying to help the kind of clarify what people are trying to get to. So, for example, just making sure I understand that you're saying that the boy has a robot hand, but we have no idea why he has a robot hand. Like, is that okay? So maybe we don't need a robot hand. That's how we process that. Find a common understanding through external references. So stories you like. We were heavily inspired by Alice in Wonderland, concepts we've read about. We were talking about the idea of memory and how every time you revisit a memory, it changes a little. And so that's very interesting when you move time backwards and forwards and edit things. So like finding those shared ideas and concepts. Quickly sketch and illustrate an idea while you're presenting it. You're an artist. Use that skill. If there's no opportunity to speak up in your team, or you seem to be a bit excluded from decision making, there is usually an opportunity to find some time to show and explain it to someone who does have the power to present that idea or express that concern that you have. If done tactfully, there's nothing really to lose. Having strong opinions can be really good, but it's important to hold them loosely. You might think you've solved everything, but you may not have. You may have made it much harder for the rest of the team. So, be prepared to let go of your ideas as well. All right. So my second main concept that I'm going to talk about is aligned communication. And these all kind of mesh together, or how to create and maintain a shared language. So trying to explain a 100% visually focused game with words. This is something that we were trying to do. we were trying to do this. We just wrote documents and documents of just text and text and text describing the game. And there's a reason why I started this talk with the trailer. Like, it's almost impossible for me to really break down exactly what this game is without you seeing it being played and in motion. So it was really important for us to understand that as a team. And it wasn't just that we had to try and explain this visually focused game without words to the players. We also had to explain the game internally without words, because like trying to describe something without it existing with these really strange and unique concepts was extremely hard. So we relied on visual communication, and I recommend you do that as well. So studies show that on average, people remember 10% of what you hear, 20% of what you read, and 80% of what you see and do. And I mean, that shouldn't be really a surprise for any of you. You've heard that before. Images speak 1,000 words, all that. And I'm also just essentially pointing out the role of concept artists on the team. The goal of the concept artist is to create a visual representation of the end goal of the game, and then the team can kind of look at that and become aligned and kind of reference that as discussions take place. So great job. And this is really good for everyone to remember, particularly if you start just writing too much. I get really excited about writing for some reason, even though I'm an artist. So, get back to visual communication. For example, here are some diagrams that John, our art director, did put together in order to bring the team on board with some of the larger concepts within the game. On the left, there is a lovely illustrated breakdown of the whole game's narrative put into like a graph form. And on the right, there is diagrams of some visual redesigns that we were working through for some puzzle objects within the game that we were trying to make and justify their existence within the world. I'm not sure if we actually solved that, but we just let it happen. All right, so here's some close-ups of that. So here, this is just kind of describing that you kind of start on a little boat treehouse. You go through 2 or 3 islands, and then you see a snapshot, and then you kind of repeat that until eventually you get to the final garden, and a storm kind of increases in and things get quite dramatic near the end. And this is just some close-ups of some of the diagrams that John put together for the team. These are really, really helped us kind of understand what we were going for. So the more kind of diagrams and things you can rely on, the better. It also was a similar approach for us in the design team. So at that point, I had kind of worked through my animation pipeline, felt pretty good about it, and I actually moved on to game design and puzzle design. And to make things easy for us, we actually we moved our design schematics from documents and spreadsheets to a symbol and like sketch-based approach. It's a very strange, unique game, and so we made a very strange, unique way of representing gameplay. So these are kind of prototype sketches that I took photos of when we were kind of prototyping the puzzles within the game. So like the line represents time, and we would put a little Lego piece on the page and just move it forwards, and then we would be like, I'm in this timeline, so then you'd go up, and so it's timeline 1, timeline 2, timeline 3, based on what you've changed in the world. It was a really clear and amazing tool for us to communicate within the design team, and also we could also pretty much play the game in a very abstract form on a piece of paper. That was very key. But looking back, it looks like a mess. I can hardly understand what's going on. When we were consumed by development, everything made sense, and especially near the end, we had developed these symbols, these shared ideas. The whole team was kind of understanding what we were working for, and that really only comes with time and effort. And our communication had improved immensely because of this. But there's also a pitfall here. Once you create a robust way of communicating within your team, it's really easy to become insular and become experts on your game. And it becomes harder to communicate what your game is to people outside of the team because your brain's so stuck within the game. So it can be harder to communicate for marketing, getting contractors on board with all of this like crazy stuff that you've created to make the game easier for the core team. It becomes harder to explain it to other people. And this can be offset by having a producer or project manager that straddles both worlds and to kind of help the development forward. And luckily at that point, we'd found someone, so we were able to really focus on these kind of visual communication tools. And one more tool that we ended up doing, so this is something I put together. We used GIFs to kind of explain design mechanics within the game. This is kind of like halfway between the Blue Mountain prototype and the final game. And this is something I put together in game to try and convince the team of some puzzle and visual designs that I'd been working on my own time. So, concept art is one thing, but then if you can make it move or even put it in the game yourself, things really start to make even more sense to everyone. It becomes real and solid. And you'll see later on that this is pretty similar to actually what we ended up with. And this was just like very, very rough implementation. I think that shows that taking a visual first approach to help the whole team get on board quickly and efficiently really helps solidify the idea. And making it move and spending some extra time to make things a little bit pretty also helps you sell your idea to other artists on the team as well. All right, so creating a shared language. Here's some little notes on that. So find the common ground early. What ideas as a team are you circling? And what can you kind of distill down? Discover the verbs and nouns of your game. What are you doing? And what objects do you care about? So like in the game, we have the concept of light and dark. Like you need to collect the light to take it to the top of the island. So we would, collect light, that's a verb, and the light is a noun and the island is a noun. And we really need to kind of develop those core concepts. We have these little boxes that jump around and we called them jumpers. And then we were just calling them jumpers in the team. That kind of stuff. You start developing that. And using real world parallels to help bring people on board. Avoiding fancy names for things or too abstract ideas. I remember early on that we were, our light puzzle mechanic where you would collect light in a lantern was something like you collect magic blobs and then you put the magic blobs in the hole. And it's just like, but that doesn't really it's magic, so it can do anything, but it didn't really communicate very well. So we actually moved to light. You collect light, and then as you move, you'll see that if you within the game you move near something that has like a dark particle, something that will suck the light, and we just use that dichotomy of light and dark that is kind of understood as humans. We kind of know what shadows and light are to kind of help communicate that idea. And within the team, and if you've developed this within the team, it also makes communicating your ideas to your audience much better as well. So even when making a unique game, finding tropes and genres to base your game on is always invaluable. This can be the foundation for your original idea. Don't reject tropes because they've been done before. You should build on them. So we really built on the idea of the concept of this narrative journey that is called the voyage and return, and it's about a concept where a character will be swept away into a fantastical land. They're confronted with things that are strange and worrying, and things get scarier and scarier. But and the world is full of metaphors, and I'm essentially describing Alice in Wonderland, and that's and a bunch of other stories that are similar to that. And we use that that concept quite a lot. Even in the visual design, we tried to represent that using colors and the moments there. All right, and the last lesson: expanding your art, or why implementing art is just as important as making it. Context. It's all about context. It really is. And this is out of context animation. So I'm sorry about that. But yeah. So as artists, it's important to envision the context that your art will be experienced in. You can create a sketch on paper and it can look good in isolation. But to see the art you're creating at the size, speed, location, time, or whatever else within the game is paramount to creating something that resonates and is cohesive. So getting it in the game earlier and often is key to understanding the context that your game is. If that thing that you're sketching or modeling or creating is only 4 pixels big and is seen for 5 frames, maybe make it a square. I don't like, it doesn't need to be complicated. Like, what else is on screen with this object? Where is the negative space on the screen that the player's seeing? Is this asset actually doing the job that it was designed for? For example, no, I actually don't have an example, but here we go. So this is going back to me implementing my idea at the top. So this was really what I did at the top here was I faked it. I completely faked it. There is no game logic in the top 2 GIFs. It was just me grabbing our rudimentary character controller that was set up in a separate scene within our game engine, and then just triggered them using some buttons that I quickly set up. I created the GIFs, and then I threw that whole scene out. It was just for the communication, but like those extra steps I took were paramount to kind of solidifying that idea within the game. And you can see how very, very similar these concepts are from the very, very first implementation to the final game. All right. So if there's any message I could force into all of your brains, it's this one. Learning the process of implementation is the key of how to make amazing, beautiful games as a small team, and probably as a big team as well. We'll see. The experience that you gain and the insight into, and you'll be able to understand the context that it will be in as you're creating the art. The more that you implement, you'll be able to predict how it will feel as you become more and more used to implementing your own art. Throughout all of our development struggles, this weird, unique game about time travel and friendship with a tiny art team wouldn't have had a chance to succeed without myself and our art director, John, which that was the art team most of the time, just 2 of us. We had to keep learning and pushing our skills within the game engine. By the end of our time, we weren't sketching, we weren't modeling, we were working 70, 80% or more time within the game engine. We were learning how to code shaders to try and make the water feel right. Like, that was really important. Even though I was more excited about shaders, the art director, John, cared more about the water. So he actually taught himself shaders to make the water the way it should be. Putting together effects, piecing together levels, cleaning up designer art and programmer art. All these skills will really, really help you develop as an artist, and will also help bring your game up to an artistic standard that you would be immensely proud of. I'm happy to say that I think we succeeded in learning this implementation skill throughout the project. And But what can you do if code and game engines are out of your experience or comfort zone or anything like that? So Josh's implementation hot tips. So find the exciting moments within the process. If you're trying to make something work, just celebrate every tiny bit of code that actually runs. Or an asset that doesn't look exactly terrible when you bring it in for the first time rather than the 5th time. It's never too late to start. Open or start an empty project in any game engine on your own time and just test the waters. Open up someone else's game project and put your own thing into it. Mod something. Throw it out if it's no good. No one's watching. You just do it for yourself. Google the heck out of every tiny question that you have and copy other people's work, but just to learn until you feel comfortable enough to create your own approach. That's how you learn quickly. And ask your programmer buddies to help you understand what they would do in your situation and try and practice that communication with someone who's highly technical. You might be surprised at how much you might be able to add to their own approach to their implementation as well. And that communication can really help. Implementation as a skill also helps foster a shared language between departments. As you learn new concepts in making and managing your art, you'll be able to better communicate to programmers and designers when something is outside of your own skill set. Everyone wins when we practice a little bit of professional empathy and step into each other's shoes and get off our own, I'm just going to make stuff like island. All right, so that's all I have to say for now. It feels the ideas are quite spread thin, but hopefully something is stuck with you. Whether it's getting off the island, developing aligned visual communication techniques, or just expanding your art skills by learning to implement and design for games in your own time, or just none of that. I hope you like the pretty pictures. I can't wait to see what amazing stuff you make. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, I'd love to hear them if I have time. Otherwise, feel free to come up to me after this and chat anytime that you see me. Just chat with me, it's fine. You can also reach me on Twitter and Instagram at Josh Allen B.